Fude here with Figboot on Pens, back again with another fountain pen review. Today I have for you a fairly recent release from Magna Carta, which is only available with a specialty nib. That nib is a Fude nib, and the pen is called the Urban. Historically, I haven't really been into specialty nibs like this, but I will admit that after recently testing some very nice Architect grinds that I very much enjoyed, I've been more willing to, we'll say, expand my specialty nib horizons to see what other grinds and styles fit my writing style and work well for me. What I'm going to do today is go over the parts and features of this offering, talk about what I care for and what I don't care for about it. I'll show some measurements, size comparisons, and provide a writing sample. Thanks go out to the good folks at Magna Carta for providing this pen for review. The Urban collection comes in 3 different resins, each of which are named after minerals and have chrome-plated trim. There is the Amberine, which is a variety of quartz found in the Death Valley region of California. Then there is Crimsonite, which is in the Adamantine family and has a unique combination of color and crystals. And then there is Azurite, which is a dynamic deep blue gemstone. And the version I have to share with you today is the Azurite. I mentioned this before, but the pen is made from resin with chrome-plated trim. This resin is commonly known as the crushed ice look, where in the most basic of terms, you take a bunch of resin and you chop it up into smaller pieces and then form it back together again with a binding resin. In the case of this material, the binding resin is the brown or the copper. It makes for an interesting look. Okay, let's take a look at the parts and features of this offering. On the top of the cap, it is rounded with a bit of a tip to it. The finial is a clear resin with a slight blue tinge to it. Below that is a chrome-plated band, which then transitions into the clip. The clip begins wide and then tapers down quickly until a bit of a teardrop ending. I do find it to be a bit on the stiff side, but it does work well with thinner materials. The cap angles up only slightly before straightening out with about an inch or so to go to the end. And at that end, the edge is rounded and there's a medium-sized step down to the barrel, which is straight for about 1.5 inches before tapering down to an end piece that, like the top, is made from that tinted resin and comes to the same rounded point of an end. The barrel is laser engraved with the name of the company. I will say that the quality of this engraving leaves a lot to be desired, with the prominent lines created by the lasers still very visible, even to my naked eye. This cap twists off with 1 3/4 rotation to reveal the highlight of this pen, which is the No. 6 stainless steel Fude nib. The nib is stamped with the Magna Carta logo, as well as the name of the pen. It also has a heart breather hole. Now, a Fude nib is typically angled between around 40 to 55 degrees, allowing for varied line widths and expressive strokes. This design offers flexibility and control, making it really popular among calligraphers and artists for its ability to create both broad and fine lines with the same pen. The nib is inspired by traditional Japanese brush techniques, with the nib replicating the feel of brush calligraphy, providing a smooth ink flow and consistency at different angles, blending the functionality with artistic expression. I'll demonstrate what it can do during the writing sample. And here's a look at the low-profile ebonite feed. The section begins with a slight flare before angling up a hair until you reach the threads and a medium-sized step up to the remainder of the barrel. This is a rather lengthy pen. It's plenty long enough to use unposted. The cap does post. It does post deeply and securely. And I like that the rounded edge of the cap does a good job of keeping it from being sharp against the inside of your palm. The cap is fairly light. Even though it does add a bit of length, I don't feel it throws off the balance or backweights the pen. But personally, I prefer to use this pen unposted. This is a cartridge converter pen. It accepts standard international cartridges and a converter is provided. With the two-piece barrel construction, eyedropping is questionable and you might try doing that at your own risk. Maybe testing out with just water first in order to see if that joint between the two materials here holds up to the interior moisture. The Magna Carta Urban collection is available at the Magna Carta website and sells for $175, which is a fairly reasonable price for a pen of this nature with the specialty nib. I'll leave a link to the note in the notes below where you can check out this pen on the Magna Carta site. Thanks again. Go out to Magna Carta for providing this pen for review. Okay, now it is time for some measurements, size comparisons, and a writing sample with this specialty nib. Okay, here we go with some size comparisons for the Magna Carta Urban. Wanted to give you another closer look at that crushed ice resin. It does have an interesting look to it. In regard to some size comparisons, I thought I'd show you some other Magna Carta models. We have the Libertarium, and then we had the Mag 600. And then finally we had a Sapphire Grand that I was going to review, but then it was unavailable for the longest time on their website. I'll have to check to see if it's available again, but it never got reviewed basically because it wasn't available. But that's what it looks like in comparison. And then in regard to some non-Magna Carta pens, here it is with an Opus 88 demonstrator. This is an Inso Piuma in the Jonathan Brooks PM4. And then here it is with a TWSBI Diamond 580 Iris. In regard to some uncapped comparisons, here it is with that Mag 600, which has a really nice flex nib on it that I enjoy. Here is the TWSBI Diamond 580 Iris, as well as the Inso Piuma. Here we go with the writing sample. Well, you know what? First of all, I wanted to show you that Fude nib again. And you can see how it is tilted up like that so that you could use it as a brush. I do care for that low profile ebonite feed. I kind of like low profile ebonite feeds like that. But what happens with this particular nib is that if you have it at a fairly steep angle and write with it flat, then it's going to be almost like a paintbrush. And then if you have it a little bit higher, it's going to write more standard. And then you could also have it upside down and it does kind of an extra fine line. But in regard to the standard writing sample, we have the Magna Carta and this is the Urban with the Fude nib. And the ink that I'm using here is from Monteverde. And this is the Blue Velvet Cake. A couple of years ago, Monteverde came out with a Sweet Life series, which I enjoy a number of the inks in that particular series. This Blue Velvet Cake was just kind of a nice saturated deep blue, as opposed to something like the Monteverde Blue, which is a bit lighter, obviously, and then Monteverde Malibu Blue. And this is what the smaller bottles looked like. And here we go with the rest of the writing sample. I will say that this nib isn't necessarily forgiving. You really need to keep it at the right angle or else it's not producing the way it needs to. And so that's just a requirement of this particular nib. if I pay attention to making sure I just keep that angle, then it just writes significantly better. If I happen to turn it slightly or I get it too high, then it doesn't quite work as well. You're not going to get a lot of line variation out of here by pressing. The line variation that you're going to get is by using it at the appropriate angle. In regard to ink flow, when you are using it at the appropriate angle, I'd see the ink flow is fairly healthy. The reverse writing, I'd say is fairly spotty. But when you get it at that right angle, it does feel like a brush. And in regard to some fast writing, which probably isn't the best thing for this particular pen, we'll see how this works. Yeah, you can see it just becomes starved a little bit if you go a little bit too fast for too long. I just don't think that that's necessarily what this nib is made for. But overall, we have the Magna Carta Urban with the Fude nib. Like I mentioned before, I hadn't really been a huge fan of a lot of specialty grinds, but I'm spending more and more time with them and becoming more and more of a fan and seeing their uses as something that's a bit of a variety. And this is a nice looking pen, and the nib performs nicely as well. And so that it's something, adding something like this is something that a nice variety to add to your collection. Okay, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.